Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Sanhedrin. We are up to Perek Hey, Mishnah Hey. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'ilui Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana Ranbai, Veliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Chana bad Miriam, Sason ben Rai, and Yoshua ben Shifra, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen. And Le'avdir ben Chaim, L'chaim, V'derefua Shelemav, Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, Betoch Shach Ule Israel, and Achnama Merav Binyamin, Or Tzion Chai ben Dvorah. The Mishnah describes how the court makes its decision in capital cases. Im matzulo zechut, if most of the judges found a reason for acquittal, pitaruhu, they acquit him right away. Vimlav, but if not, rather most of the judges hold that he is guilty. Ma'avirin dino lemachar, they delay his verdict until the next day, so that they will have time to think of reasons for acquittal in the meantime, as we learned in chapter 4, Mishnah 1. The Mishnah relates what the judges do for the rest of that day and the following night. Hayu mizdavigin zugot. They separate themselves into pairs, and each pair of judges discusses the case between themselves. Ma'atin b'machal velo yushotin yain kol yom. They would eat less than usual and not drink wine at all the whole day, so that they will be able to concentrate properly. Eating a lot of food can make a person feel sleepy and less alert. Drinking even a small amount of wine can prevent them from thinking clearly. V'nosin v'nodin kol layla, and they would continue to discuss the case through the night. Each judge would either continue discussing the case with his partner or go home and think about it himself until the morning. The proceedings of the next day, v'lamachorat mashkimin ubayin lebedin, the next day they wake up early and come to court. Hamzakeh omer, a judge who had argued for acquittal, says, Ani mizakeh hamzakani b'mkomi, I argued for acquittal and I am still in favor of acquittal, even if he had changed his mind overnight and is now in favor of conviction. He must say that he is still on the side of acquittal. As the Mishnah states next, once a judge has argued for acquittal, he may no longer argue for conviction. V'amchayev omer, and one who had argued for conviction and has not changed his mind since then says, Ani mechayev umchayevani b'mkomi, I argued for conviction and I am still in favor of conviction. However, if a judge who had argued for conviction changed his mind, he says, I argued for conviction, but I changed my mind and I'm now arguing for acquittal, as the Rambam writes in the Sanhedrin, chapter 12, Arachat 3. Hamlamed chova melamed zechut, a judge who had argued for conviction may change his mind and argue for acquittal. Aval hamlamed zechut eno yachol lachzor ulelamed chova, but a judge who had argued for acquittal may not change his mind and argue for conviction. However, this restriction applies only while the case is still being discussed. Once they are about to vote, he may indeed switch positions and argue for conviction. Ta'u b'davar, if they made a mistake in the matter, meaning they forgot what their previous positions were, or they forgot the reasons for their positions, Shnei Sofrei Adayanin Maskirin Otam, the two scribes of the court that we spoke about in chapter 4, Mishnah 3, would check their records and remind them. The next step of the trial, Im Matzulo Zechut, if they found a reason for acquittal, Pitaruhu, they acquit him right away, Vimlav, but if not, Omdim Leminyan, they take a vote. This means that if all the judges, even the ones who supported conviction the day before, are in favor of acquittal, there is no need for a vote and the accused is acquitted right away. But if some still support a guilty verdict, a vote is taken. If out of the 23 judges of the court, 12 vote for acquittal, 11 for conviction, Zakai, he has acquitted because a 1-vote majority is enough for acquittal. But if 12 vote for conviction and 11 for acquittal, or even if 11 vote for acquittal, 11 for conviction, and one says, I do not know, or even if 22 vote for acquittal for conviction, and one says, I do not know, Yosifu Dayanin, they add judges to the court, because in all these cases, a verdict cannot be reached without more judges. In the first case, 12 for conviction, 11 for acquittal, the court cannot issue a verdict because a 1-vote majority is not enough for conviction, and there is no majority at all for acquittal. A majority of at least 2 is required for conviction. A majority of 1 is required for acquittal, as we saw in chapter 1, Mishnah 6, in chapter 4, Mishnah 1. And then in the next 2 cases, where one of the judges says that he does not know, we do not have a court of 23 judges, the minimum required for capital cases, because a judge who does not know is regarded as though he were not there. Now, the process of adding judges, Ad kama mosifin, how many judges do they add? Shnaim ad shivim ve'echad, they add 2 judges and then another 2 judges until they reach a total of 71. After adding the first 2 judges, they vote again, and if there is still no suitable majority, they add another 2. They continue adding 2 judges at a time until they reach a suitable majority. Once there are 71 judges on the court, no more may be added. We do not find a court larger than the Great Sanhedrin, which had 71 judges. The Mishnah discusses what happens once the court is increased to 71 judges. 36 Nezikin u 35 mechayvin. If 36 of the 71 judges vote for acquittal and 35 vote for conviction, zakai, he is acquitted because a majority of 1 is enough to acquit. 36 mechayvin u 35 nezikin. If 36 vote for conviction and 35 vote for acquittal, in which case they cannot convict the accused because a majority of 1 is not enough for conviction. Danin elu kineged elu. They debate the case with one another until one of those who voted for conviction changes his mind and agrees with the opinions of those who voted for acquittal, providing a majority in favor of acquittal. The Mishnah could have cited the opposite situation where a judge who voted for acquittal changes his mind and votes for conviction. In that case, there would be 37 votes for conviction and 34 for acquittal. The defendant would then be convicted and sentenced to death. The Mishnah chose not to use that example because it prefers to speak of a positive outcome. If the court cannot reach a suitable majority, the accused is set free. And that is in the Perek Hey Mishnah Hey. Now, the end of Perek Hey taught how the court reaches its decision in capital cases. Perek Vav and the beginning of the next chapter describes how the death penalty is carried out if the defendant is found guilty. The court uses one of 4 methods to execute a criminal, depending on the type of sin he committed: stoning, burning, beheading, and strangulation. Perek Vav Mishnah Aleph, our Mishnah begins with the description of death by stoning. Nigmar Adin, once the trial is ended and the defendant was sentenced to execution by stoning, Motzi'in oto l'soklo, they take him out to stone him. Once the court reaches a guilty verdict, it may not delay the execution, as the Rambam writes in the Sanhedrin, chapter 12, Halacha 4. Now, although Mishnahs 1 and 2 mention only death by stoning, most of the laws also apply to the other 3 methods of execution. The Mishnah chose stoning for its example because it is the first of the 4 types of execution mentioned in the Torah in Sefer Shemot, chapter 19, verse 13. Bet Askilaya Chutza Bet Din, the place of stoning, meaning the place of stoning was a structure used for this type of execution. It was located outside the courthouse at some distance away. Shenemar Hotze etam kalel, as it is stated in the Torah in Vayikra, chapter 24, verse 14, take out the blasphemer, and the entire community shall stone him. By saying take out, the verse implies that the execution is performed some distance away from the courthouse. If the court is in a town, the execution area must be outside the town. The distance from the courthouse to the execution area should be at least 6 mil. As the Rambam writes in Sanhedrin, chapter 12, Halacha 3, 6 mil is between 3.6 and 4.5 miles, or between 5.8 and 7.2 kilometers. Now, the reason the Torah requires the execution to be done far from the court is to delay it for a while in the hope that in the meantime, a reason will be found to acquit the accused and spare him from death. Even when the condemned is being led to the place of execution, measures are taken to make sure that if necessary, the verdict can still be changed. As the condemned is led to the place of execution, one person stands at the door of the courthouse with flags in his hand. Another person sits on a horse at a distance from him, but within his sight. As the Mishnah will teach further, the job of the rider is to race ahead and stop the execution if he sees the flagman waving the flags. He therefore goes as far as possible from the court toward the place of stoning, so that he will have the best possible chance to reach the prisoner in time, but make sure that he remains within sight of the flagman so that he will see him if he signals. If someone says, now this someone could be one of the judges or one of the scholars presented in court, or even someone from the street, if they say, I have a new reason to acquit him, the other person, the flagman, waves the flags as a signal, and the rider on the horse races to the condemned and stops him from being executed until the court decides whether this new reason is enough to reverse their decision. And even if the condemned himself says, I have a reason for my own acquittal, they bring him back to the courthouse to hear his argument. Even if this happens 4 or 5 times, we bring him back to the courthouse each time. 4 or 5 times is not meant literally. There is no limit to the number of times he may be brought back to the court. ובלבד שיש ממש בדבריו. However, we bring him back only if there is something to his words, meaning his reason seems to have some validity. It's necessary for his argument to seem sound only after the first 2 times he has suggested a reason for his acquittal. The first 2 times, however, he has returned to court even if his argument appears baseless. The first 2 times we say that his argument might be a good one, but he has a hard time expressing it because he is afraid of his upcoming death and cannot think clearly, and when he returns to court he will calm down and be able to make his case properly. The Mishnah's case here is where he already claimed twice that he has a reason for acquittal, and each time he turned out to be mistaken. If he then says a 3rd time that he has a reason for acquittal, he is brought back only if the reason seems to have some validity. To determine this, the court sends along 2 Torah scholars to listen to what he has to say. If after the judges discuss the new reason they find the basis to acquit him, they acquit him. But if not, he goes out again to be stoned. Another measure that was taken to give the condemned the last chance to be acquitted, as he is taken out to be executed, an announcement is made before him, meaning someone walks in front of him and says, Ish ploni blem ploni yotzeli sakel, so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, is being taken out to be stoned. Al shavar avera plonit, because he did such and such a transgression. Uploni edav, and so-and-so and so-and-so are his witnesses who testified against him. Kol mi sheyodea lo zechut yavo vilamed alav. Anyone who knows a reason for his acquittal should come forward and present it. The execution and the details of the crime are made known to the public, so that if anyone has a reason to acquit the sinner, he will come and tell it to the court. The witnesses are named too, so that if other people know that the witnesses were in a different place at the time of the crime, they can come forward and disqualify the testimony. If 2 or more people saw the witnesses in a different place at the time of the alleged crime and they testified to this in court, the first witness's testimony is disqualified under the law of Hazama, as explained in Chapter 5, Mishnah 1. For this reason, the announcer must also state the time and place of the crime, because only then can others accuse the witnesses of being in a different place at that time. And that is the Nabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.